Hey everyone, this is Curb and I bring you another deck profile. Today we're going to be taking a look at Magnolia Grade 4 post BT13. So, a little bit about the deck before we hop into the deck profile. As you saw in the video, this is actually a very fun deck to play. The way that we've built it here, and I kind of think the best way you can build Magnolia Grade 4, if you're going to try and do that right now, is this kind of stall toolboxy deck that is actually pretty decent at what it's trying to do. The problem is there really isn't, we're kind of just lacking in a lot of stall and defensive cards to actually make that strategy kind of viable in standard right now, especially since the big three are running around and kind of will run over this. I'll be honest, I believe I fought Leonorn and Youthberg, that same locals. I managed to best one of the Leonorns I fought, and of course I almost beat Youthberg with this deck. So it is definitely possible to compete with this deck, but the thing I will say is it is very skill intensive. You need to be like a really good player and understand game flow, understand just think ahead and like count your guard. You have to play perfectly, otherwise you're not going to win. And as you saw, even in that video, I was not doing all the best plays, and that kind of resulted in me losing in an instance where I probably could have taken the match if I had done everything right. But with that lengthy tirade out of the way, let's go ahead and hop straight into the deck profile. Right, so starting out where we always do, of course, being the ride line. So now we are playing a bit of a non-traditional ride line here. So as you probably could tell from the video, so let's go ahead and go over it. So of course, we start off with Lotte, just generic D starter, can be anything you want, but Lotte is in theme, so we like playing it. Grade 1 is going to be our typical Rancor chain. Act once per turn, Soul Blast 2, draw 2 cards, discard an order, and then if you don't, you have to discard 2 cards instead. We play a lot of orders to facilitate this. Some of them are a little bit interesting. Once we get to the orders, I will talk a lot more about them, but just for now, I think that it's really hard to beat Rancor Chain in Stoicheia as a grade 1 target, so I'm not even going to try. And then our grade 2 slot is actually going to be just kind of a dud here, going to be that Friendship Fairy. So Friendship Fairy is the superior rider for Magnolia. So if you have a grade 3 Vanguard with Magnolia and your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3, you can CB1 and shove it into the soul in order to ride a Magnolia, a grade 4 Magnolia from your hand. So if you go second, this card lets you get onto grade 4 Magnolia on your turn 3. The reason we're playing it in the ride deck is that we have complete access to it. This was an idea brought up by my deck tester. He does really like it, and I do see the logic behind it. It gives you basically 3 extra slots in your main deck for more toolboxy cards, and it's not that big of a problem. You are kind of missing out on like the Tears Husk getting a order back, but as we'll see, it doesn't make a huge difference like most of the time. But just being able to have access to Friendship Fairy in case you need it. Of course, every single game that I've played so far, I've gone first, so it hasn't really come up. But anyways, and of course our top end is Magnolia. Of course, the grade 3, so at the end of battle attack, CB1, choose a back row rear guard. It gets, well, you don't actually choose back row. You choose any rear guard, gets 5k, and then it can attack from the back row. If you Persona Road, which you're not going to be doing in this deck, you can choose 3. But for the most part, this is our ride line, basically just to make sure that we are consistent in the deck. Alright, so getting into the main deck, of course, this is going to be a main deck of 50 cards. Because, you know, that is the new standard right now. So, of course, we are playing 4 copies of the Magnolia Elder. Very old card at this point from BT4. When it's placed on Van, you choose a card from your soul, call it to rear guard, and then if you have 3 or more, if you have a Magnolia in your soul, and then it makes so all your rear guards get plus 5k, they can attack from the back row and intercept from the back row. So very old card, very basic effect, very power crept in this instance. But the main reason, of course, we're playing the deck is, you know, Mask is honestly kind of better, but I will say this deck is a lot more fun. It's a lot less rigid than Magnolia Mask, and there's a lot of wiggle room and a lot of technical play that you do in it. But you have a very basic boss, top end, and you kind of just have to work within those constraints, considering this is still a turn 4 deck. Okay, so getting into the actual reason why we're playing Magnolia Elder, of course, that is going to be the Stride Fodder Dragon for Stoicheia, which is, his name is Ilarguv, or however you say that. So when he's placed on rear or guardian, you choose a grade 4 from your hand and reveal it. And then if you either have a grade 4 in hand or on van, basically you activate the effect depending on where he was placed. I know it's an FFR, it's kind of hard to see, but if he's placed on guardian, he's a 15k shield, so very cool. But if he's placed on rear guard, you can Soul Blast 1, choose a grade 2 or greater card with a different card name from him, and put from your drop, and put it into your soul. So this card is insanely good. Oh, he does also have this other effect, which I usually forget, is when it's discarded for writing to a grade 3 from the right deck or paying the cost for strike, draw a card. Of course, you can actually only use it when you're writing to grade 3 in this deck, but the main skill, of course, is that on place rear guard. This lets you toolbox a whole bunch of different things. The one downside is that you can't get more copies of him, which is, I will say, a fair restriction. I know Soikea tends to have a lot of unfair restrictions. This one is totally justified, because if you didn't have that restriction, you could go place, Soul Blast, and another one, place, Soul Blast, add another one, and then just build a board for free. As he is right now, you can still build a pretty big board for essentially free from one card, but he is just so versatile in the deck. He is the main reason why the deck is functional and pretty much playable at this instance. So you always want to be seeing this card. You want to try and get him out as quickly as possible, get him into circulation, and reuse him as much as you can. Alright, continuing with the grade 3s, we are actually playing the most copies of this card I think I've ever played, 3 copies of Florence. So Florence is the grade 3 cycle card from Festival Booster for Soikea. Of course, she has the natural, if you get a drive, or if your opponent gets a drive or damage check, she gets plus 10k power and plus 10k shield. So most of our grade 3s in this deck do actually have extra shield value, which is why we're opting to play mostly just these 2. But when it attacks, you discard the top 2 cards of your deck, and then you perform the following. You Soul Charge, and it gets 5k until a turn, but if all the cards are not normal units, it gets 15 instead of 5. And then, of course, you can remove an Overtrick from your drop, and then choose a unit card from your drop and put it into your hand. So, as I said in the previous video, I'm actually really liking Florence at 3, because I want to be able to see her, because what she realistically does for the deck is, 1, she's a really good attacker, which is why I tend to put a lot of her in my decks, at least at 1 or 2 copies. But the main reason I have her in the deck is because she is kind of a mill engine by herself. She mills 3 cards, and she basically mills 3 cards, because one of the cards goes to Soul, and then basically anything in Soul can get fetched out by our grade 3 Stride Fodder Dragon. So she's just here to accelerate your mills so that you have a bigger drop zone, and the more cards you have in your drop zone, the more options you actually end up having in the deck. So honestly, she's in here. She's a great attacker, but I love that mill ability. Especially now that we have 50 cards, deck out is much less of a problem, so you don't really have to worry about that. And then, of course, finishing off the grade 2 units, I'm actually just playing 2 copies of Inlet Pulse. Honestly, you could probably tone this down to 1. I'm sorry, Inlet Pulse, you're my homeboy. I love you, but his skill is that at the end of the battle he attacks if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, and wait. I'm reading the Flagberg skill. That's irrelevant. At the end of the turn, if you attack 4 more times, you can put him into Soul and draw a card. That's the only skill that actually matters. Inlet Pulse, really cool. Homeboy, but he is a brick, and you do not want to draw into him. You want to call him off things like Forbid All. You want to call him from drop, and you realistically don't actually need more than 1 in circulation, because Inlet Pulse goes to Soul. Okay, next turn. Call, Soul Blast the Inlet Pulse. Okay, add the Inlet Pulse back. Call the Inlet Pulse. Put him back to Soul. So very good resource advantage engine. Unfortunately, I do think we have to keep playing him. He is a non-shield card, which is why I really don't want to be playing too many copies of him. But at 2, I've been finding him to be pretty fine. You could even tone this down to 1, because you realistically only need 1 Inlet Pulse in rotation at a time. And of course, to facilitate our grade 4s, and of course our multiple copies of different grade 3s, we have Forbid All. The order that when you play it, you choose 2 grade 3 or 4 units with different names, either add the grade 4s to your hand or call the grade 2s. So you can definitely just call one of these and one of these, one of these and one of these. Probably you're always going to want to try and call one of these or the Inlet Pulse. You're probably always going to want to get the Inlet Pulse out of the deck. And then, of course, if you're missing the Elder, you can go ahead and add that. And then basically this card is a 1-card proc of this, because you can call this thing from Soul, add the Magnolia, Soul Blast, reveal the Magnolia, and then you get to add anything from your drop. Another cool interaction with this card is that since the Stride Fodder Dragon adds grade 2s or greater, let's say you have to discard this for Rancor Chain. Sucks, I don't have it, I can't get it back. Or you damage check it and then you heal it out. What you can actually do is you can have it in drop, play this, Soul Blast, add the Forbiddle back, and then play it. Of course, to do this play, you do actually already need to have the Elder, and you also need to have this. But the fact that you have access to Forbiddle, as if it hits anywhere, if you mill it off Florence, if you damage check it, if you have to discard it, you can just add it back. That just makes this, gives this deck just like a little bit of extra oomph that, you know, a lot of decks don't actually have, since this is the only deck that can realistically play this card. Alright, getting into the grade 2s, we are starting off with a very important figure here, that being the Goyle Dote. So Goyle Dote is the grade 2 that when in the drop zone, if your Magnolia is placed during the ride phase, you can slide him into the soul, as long as you don't have another copy of him in the soul already, and then give your Vanguard an extra 5k. So it's just basically a recurable soul every single time. It gives you something to call off Magnolia. Playing it at 3, mostly because of space reasons, but this is definitely a card that you love to see. And of course, we have a mill engine in being Florence, so this is another good card that you want to mill, because you keep riding, you just add it back, and if you, or add it back to Soul, and then if you have 2 of them in Soul, you go ride Magnolia Elder, put this to Soul, Magnolia Elder skill, Superior Call, skill of other ones, since you don't have one in Soul, put it to Soul, get another 5k, giving your Vanguard extra power, because in this deck, most of the time your Vanguard is going to be like one of your weakest swings, because it's just swinging for 13, even though it does have triple drive. And this is also one of our best attackers, because when it attacks from the back row, it gets an extra 10k, so with any Magnolia's 5k to attack from back row, that's going to make a 25k column. And then if it is in the center middle back row, you do actually get to retire at the end of that battle and draw a card. So it's like basically 3 more copies of Inlet Pulse Dragon. It lets you sustain yourself and attack very well. Next up, we do have, this is a little more of a flex slot. We have 3 copies of Impex. I'm not a huge fan of this card, but it does serve 2 kind of purposes. I would probably tone this down to 2, but let's go ahead and go over his skill. So in the back row, he gets an extra 10k, and then if you have 3 or less rear guards, all your rear guards in the same column cannot be chosen by opponent's card effects. So this gives resist to a couple of your units. It's not super relevant right now. There aren't a lot of things that actually choose. There's things like Youthberg. Prison is still kind of running around. Let's see, other than that, Dragul does not target. Magnolia, oh not Magnolia, Leonore technically does have some removal, so it's somewhat helpful against that. But the main reason I do have him here is because he's a 23k attacker that has intercept, so probably the best you can get for free. Better than Gnosla. You might think that, oh, Gnosla, give power, but Gnosla is attacking for 15. I want rear guards that can attack over defensives or serve some other utility purpose. Like Inlet Pulse is draws. The grade 3 Stride Fodder is absolutely insane. So this is mostly here to be just like a 23k attacker, hits over defensives, and that's pretty much the only reason he is here. I'd probably, like I said, I'd probably tone this down to 2 because you're very toolboxy. You don't actually need to see this card unless you need it, and you have ways of getting it back. You can add it back with Stride Fodder Dragon if you need it, or do other things. What I would probably replace the 3rd copy of Impex with is this guy. I absolutely kind of love this guy. He is CK Saketh. He came out in one of the Festival collections. So he can intercept from the middle back row, center, rear guard, and when he does intercept from the back row, he gets an extra 10k. So he's a 15k guard. I like him. This is also another flex slot. I like him because early game, if you see him, you can call him behind Vanguard, and then you basically have an extra trigger to guard with. You don't really want him there because that's kind of Goyle Dote's spot. So you can kind of just keep him there. You're giving up on an attack because he is only a 15k attacker, but he serves as a defensive option that you can just recur over and over again. So you can have recurable 15k shields basically every single turn, because once you're on Magnolia Elder, he can intercept from the back row, and he doesn't care where he intercepts from in the back row as long as it is just the back row. So I would probably play more of him. Unfortunately, I don't actually have more copies of him right now. I know he's like a 50-cent card, which is why I thought I had more in the collection. But getting into the order cards, one of the actual really clutch orders that I really love in this deck is, of course, Command of Death Restraint. So this is an order card where you discard the top card of your deck, choose a card with grade less than or equal to your Vanguard, call it to rear guard if it's a unit card, and then if it's a normal order, named something different, you can actually add it to your hand. So this is basically a costless, because you just mill, and like we said in this deck, you want to mill anyway, is another part of our mill engine, I guess. Very good card. It's pretty much free revival, but the main reason that I like this card is because of its grade. So remember, Stride Fodder Dragon says add a grade 2 or greater card. So what you do is you play this card in your last turn, and then let's say you need to get recursion, and you have one of them in hand, and you have one of them in drop. So you call the first one, Soul Blast 1. Oh, let me add this grade 2 card to my hand. Play. Mill card. Call the second one. Oh, I didn't add it back, so Soul Blast 1. Add something else. Add an Inlet Pulse. Call. You just got 3 rear guards, or 2 extra rear guards, for playing 1 card with this combo. Just like I said, this deck is very toolboxy, and this card is absolutely insane. I'm honestly thinking about bumping it up a little bit more, but the one issue that this card does have in this deck is that it doesn't work with Friendship Fairy. Obviously, you need to Soul Blast Friendship Fairy out first, and unlike the other revival cards, this does not Soul Blast. So you have to figure out a way to. You have to manage the cards in your soul and Soul Blast out Friendship Fairy as quickly as possible in order to actually use it with this. But still, very solid card. It's made me consider playing, what's that one card? Like Death Invitation, the grade 3 that's CB1, calls something from drop, and then if you Alchemagic, it does other effects. But I just like that card because it's a CB1 call something. And then actually, I think one of the first times we're actually seeing this, but I'm playing some Blitz orders in this deck. Ghost Chase, another funny BT1 card. So you choose one of your units, gets plus 5k, and then you choose one of your rear guards that's not beak attack and return it to your hand. So this is basically here for the big funny, because this card is absolutely insane, and any way you can reuse this card every single turn is absolutely nuts. So this card reuses it because you call it back from the drop zone, and this card reuses it because you add it back to your hand. So in that instance, you can either save it if you don't need its shield value to call again next turn and recur your entire board, get Inlet Pulse, keep drawing cards, or if you desperately need it, Ghost Chase with this card is a 20k shield because you add it back, and you should be on grade 4 at that point. So that's just like 24k or 20k shield right there if you desperately need it. And I think you did also see in that video that I really should have just... I had 2 of these in my drop zone, and I was holding on to one of them because I wanted to be a 15k shield. So I minimized my attacks. I only did 5 attacks instead of 6. If I had called this, Soul Blast, add this back, I'm basically just getting an extra 5k shield and not losing out on the 15 from calling this. So it is very funny. It's very cheeky. I would not question you if you said, no, I'm not playing this card. This card's bad. But the specific interactions it has in this deck is just very funny and honestly almost good sometimes. It does technically have synergy with NPEX too, because it reduces the number of rear guards. So if you need to have 3 or less, and just for whatever reason. But very funny, actually playable, cool. Right, so getting into the grade 1 cards. This is going to be pretty brief because Magnolia is a grade 2 and up deck. So I'm actually opting to play 2 cats. You can probably tone this down to 1 cat, but always play 1 cat at least in every deck that you play. I guess we'll quickly go over it. So cats, their effects are when they're put on Guardian or Rear Circle, you put 2 cards that were originally in your right deck from your Solar Drop face up into your right deck, and then you get a different effect. They're either 20k shield on Guardian Circle, or the Stoichea cat soul charges you 2 and then gives something 5k. You really do not need the soul charge at all in this deck. You have things like Inlet Pulse, you have Goyledote. You basically have infinite soul. Sometimes you run out, but most of the time you will not. The only other grade 1s we're playing in the deck are a 2-2 split on Spiritual Body plus in the Dim Darkness. In all honesty, I am thinking of swapping these out. I guess we'll quickly just go over this. So this is Spiritual Body Condensation. It's a BT1 card. You play with Soul Blast 1, call a card with equal to or less than your Vanguard. It gets 5k. And then, of course, Dim Darkness does the same thing where you Soul Blast 1, you check top 3, mill 1. I believe this is, this is the errata card because it says choose a card from among it, discard it. The unerrata says choose up to 1, but you do actually have to mill. It's a mandatory mill. And then you call something from the drop zone and it doesn't get any power. So these cards are here to Soul Blast out Friendship Fairy and allow you to actually play it, get it on board so that you can Superior Ride from your hand. What I'm thinking of replacing these, I think in the Dim Darkness can probably stay in the deck. I'm not so sure about Spiritual Body Condensation, because a lot of times if you're just calling back Friendship Fairy with this, you're giving it 5k and you're wasting that 5k anyway. But what I'm thinking about replacing it is that one grade 3 order that retires, because as you've seen in the deck, there is actually no board control, and that card does let you actually get something back. It would really suck if you retire grade 1. You'd prefer to do 2 or 3 because you have really good targets for that, but I think this is like your only target. But at the same time, you could also play that card. If you retire grade 1 and you have a PG in your drop zone, you can just call it back, draw into a Ghost Chase, and then just bounce your PG back, in all honesty, which is another reason why Ghost Chase, very funny, very cool. But in all honesty, I would recommend playing at least 6 orders. Technically, you can discard this off Rancor Chain, but you would rather not. So I think the deck is playing, what is it, 6, 7, 8, with 6 orders, with 2 of them being Blitz orders. So I would recommend at least 6 if you're going to be playing Rancor Chain in the right deck. So of course, just finishing off the grade 1s, of course we do have just the 4 PGs. You cannot play Elementaria in this deck because you are a grade 4 deck, and that will only work if you are on grade 3 or less. Alright, getting up into the trigger lineup. Of course, we are going to be playing the 4 Soulin crits. Sometimes it comes up. Like I said, you usually don't have Soulm issues in the deck, but you know it's better to have it if not. And you probably won't be calling them anyway because they just go up to 9 or 10k. I guess it does make a difference somewhat, but most of the time I don't really care about that. Playing 3 more crits for a total of 7 in the deck. We are doing that so that we can actually play 4 draw triggers, because this is, as cool and toolboxy this deck is, you do need to see your pieces. You need to see grade 4 Magnolia. You really want to see Stride Fodder Dragon. You want to see the Death Commands Restraint, which is really good. And just like losing out on the extra, like I guess 20k you would get from front triggers is not really a huge deal. Also, not playing front triggers enables you to swing with your front row rear guards without having to like worry about them losing out on power. And a lot of this time in this deck, you're kind of just swinging at rears, and it doesn't really matter because they're like 18. Then, of course, just finishing off the trigger lineup, of course, going to be playing 4 heals and then 1 OT. Stoicheia OT just always going to be very hard to beat. You could play blue OT, but I feel like you have enough drop zone recursion with the Stride Fodder Dragon and the ability to just like keep calling it back that it's really not as necessary, and Stoicheia OT is just way too versatile to kind of just like take over or be replaced, I should say. Alright, so let's go ahead and finish off the video with our typical test hand. So looking at our test hand, we are trying to basically have an order card and also see our Magnolia Elder. We saw the Elder, we saw an order card. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this as my discard target, even though I would like to play it. But remember, if we get the Stride Fodder Dragon, we can always just add it back. So I'm going to keep keeping that. Margaret, I don't really need right now. But I will go ahead and just redraw. Goyodo, very good to have. 15k, preferred not be a heal trigger. And then PGs are honestly kind of necessary in this meta, especially if you're going up against something like a Youthberg or a Dredgewald. You definitely want to be keeping the PGs in hand. So this deck is very much a stall deck, as funny as that is. So a lot of the time you're going to find yourself attacking into rear guards, which is I think the best strategy that you can be doing into. You have 6 attacks every single turn, or basically 4 once you get to grade 3, all the way up to 6 attacks, and you might as well just like throw a couple of them at the rear guards anyway. I usually like to do it before I tech the Vanguard, just to kind of maybe get some shield out of them, basically just get rid of those rear guards. And then I'm mostly worried because I've been burned by front triggers way too many times and then been able to not even attack into the rear guards. So we do actually have a pretty good opening hand. I think Let's say if we're going first, we don't actually need this card. So I usually discard all of my non-shield cards, assuming I don't need them. Of course, using the rank card chain here to Soul Blast and then draw 2 cards. Probably just going to get rid of... Spiritual Body might actually be pretty good in this instance because I can just call something back and give it 5k. Our opponent's going to attack. I think that since we're a stall deck, we're just going to go ahead and just guard that first attack, assuming they don't call something behind the Vanguard. Go ahead and draw to another heal trigger. Obviously, just discard the Goyle-Dote right now and ride into our Friendship Fairy. Do nothing, and then just swing and pass. If they had a rear guard, I'd probably just swing into it, just because hit into a draw trigger, very nice. I definitely needed some extra cards. Ooh, getting the second Goyle-Dote is going to be pretty cool. So now we're going to definitely need at least 1 damage. Ooh, we damage checked the Forbidal. Normally that'd be pretty bad, but we are the one deck that actually does not care as long as we can heal it out, that is. But we do actually have 3 heals or 2 heals out, so we'll have to try and aim for that. So we're going to discard our draw trigger, and we're just going to be riding into our Magnolia. What we want to do here is get our 4 attacks this turn. Honestly, we don't actually need 4 attacks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call this, call that. If I had something really good in my drop, I probably would call it out, but I don't think we really realistically need anything. So Magnolia is actually going to be on my weakest swing here, so we're going to swing 13, drive check 1, drive check 2, a draw trigger would give power to a Goyle-Dote, because if they get defensive here, then Florence is going to be able to, you know, kind of do that anyway. So we're going to swing Florence. Hopefully with Florence, we can mill or soul charge a Stride Fodder Dragon, because we have the Spiritual Body Condensation still in hand, so things will get nuts after that. So we're going to mill 1, mill 2, unfortunately not doing that, but look at that, we soul charged our grade 3 dragon, so we're off to the races, as of course we just get a 5k, and then Goyle-Dote's going to swing and draw us a card, another Magnolia Elder. Perfectly fine, perfectly cool. Of course, we're going to be taking some damage. We're Magnolia Elder, so we don't have a lot of good cards to defend with in these early games, so hopefully we only take like 2 damage. So I've been pushed to 4 or 5 like on my first grade 3 turn a lot of times, but we're actually looking pretty good right now. So what we do here is, what I think I'm going to do is ride into the Magnolia Elder. So at this instance, the Goyle-Dote in our drop zone is going to proc. We actually have 2 of them that proc at the same time. We're going to put one of them into the soul, and then I think I'm actually going to call one out and put the other one in the soul. The other option I had is to actually call this thing out, but what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to activate my Spiritual Body Condensation, Soul Blast this out, and call it back out into the back row, probably, just so it can't get attacked into. Then I'm going to use its skill, Soul Blast 1. I can add any grade 2 or greater card. So I only have 2 options right now, the Death Restraint or the Goyle-Dote. This is actually a difficult choice because I can use the Death Restraint next turn. But since I do actually have an MPEX in hand, I think I'm going to just add the Death Restraint for next turn. So if this dies, I can kind of just revive it. And then, of course, I'm going to be calling this here. I can't play another order this turn, so I think I'm just going to end with like 5 attacks here. Theoretically, I could have added the Goyle-Dote. I can still call the Goyle-Dote from hand, but it's not really going to be that strong of an attacker, so I might as well just keep it. So let's see. This is actually the... Ooh, this is 23, 25, 23, 23 right now. But let's swing Vanguard first, see what we get off the drive checks. Heal trigger. Ooh, very good. Heal out the Forbid All. Second check, third check. Getting another 15k shield there. And then, of course, we're going to give the power to, it doesn't really matter. Probably here. We're going to swing 23. If they get a trigger, this is 23. Mill 2 more cards. An MPEX and an Inlet Pulse. Very good. We didn't really want an Inlet Pulse in the first place. Gonna attack 23, and then, of course, attack another one. Discard, draw a card. And, of course, at this instance, we're kind of just attacking into their rear guards. So let's say we want to intercept with this because we really don't need it. Take another 2 damage. I'm not going to be damage checking the OT because that's going to mess up numbers a lot. And then, of course, let's say we need to PG, discarding a Goyle-Dote. And then, of course, just like that. So we can go into our turn 5 because we're still trying to stall out the game. Obviously, we would rewrite our Magnolia because we do have it. And then, of course, just adding back this into Soul, and then this into Soul, calling one out, putting the other one into Soul. And then we actually do have a lot of interesting plays we can do here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to overcall this And then I'm going to Soul Blast the Goyodote and add back. Theoretically, there's actually 2 options here. Wait, I already know. We just add the Forbidal. I was thinking you could Soul Blast out the Magnolia Elder and add the other Magnolia Elder, but this is so much better because activate Forbidal. Okay, let me call an Inlet Pulse. Okay, let me add a Magnolia Elder anyway. Let me deck Thin for free, basically. And then, of course, we just want something to fill that slot there. Realistically, I could have just, you know, called that, but what I can do is, this is in drop zone. I probably just want to call this here to be a interceptor. So now I have 23, 20, 18, 18. So your first attacks are always going to be 18, 18. So not playing fronts means you can just swing in front ringers without worry. Probably swing 15 first to 23, drive check 1, drive check 2, drive check 3, heal trigger, power to Goyodote, swing, retire, draw 1, swing. Maybe we don't mill here, but YOLO. Soul Charge, the OT, very cool. If we Soul Blast it out, we can use Florence skill to add a PG back. And then, of course, end phase, Soul, draw. And obviously, in that instance, we weren't guarding a whole ton, but we have a lot of cards. 15k Intercept, Ghost Chase in our hand to add back the 15k, or theoretically the 10k if we really need it. Alright, so that's going to do it for the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to do all those YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.